Hello. Hello, this is the My Artifact episode number 4000, 4120, maybe 25. I'm not really sure. 25, 26, probably. This is little bit of blur. Yeah, it's okay. All right. Today's date is June 26, 2026. It's been almost like a morning at 6:45 a.m. Alright, should we jump into the question? Alright, let's go. Alright, so question is how will I prevent minor from accessing your content? That's a really good question. Okay. First of all, what is at least this question and why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to build an application called My Artifact. What is at least this application? When you write the diary, you cannot able to be write the diary the way that you wanted to. The reason is that your thinking process is actually much more faster than your writing speed. Your writing speed is slow is not because of that you are thinking faster. It is because of the amount of effort that you put on writing is far more bigger than thinking. Even if you get pen paper and things and that, but you cannot able to be kind of like a print your thoughts. I'm saying print your thoughts. uh, because of this, writing is a kind of like a bit difficult or like a required lot of amount of effort to do this thing. So that's why very less people are writing a diary, or very less, like almost nothing really at all, who are kind of like a writing a diary or kind of like a things and that. But what if instead of writing a diary, what if we could record a diary, like a audio record a diary? The stuff that you are kind of like a listening right now or seeing right now, this is my audio diary, or I called it My Artifact. My Artifact episode number 4126. I'm doing this thing for past 11 year. I am doing this thing every single day. The amount of value that it add into me, uh, like a it just like a, I don't know how to supposed to explain. The person that I'm became today and the person that I will become tomorrow, it is all because of Artifact. The amount of value that it add inside of me, I wanted to share this value to the people. How do I supposed to do that? By building an application. My application is somewhat something like a YouTube platform. In a YouTube platform, you can kind of like upload your video, other people sees your video. Artifact is the same. You record your artifact, upload your artifact in Artifact platform. Other people kind of like listen your platform. So this is my application. Okay, there is a one catch is that your privacy has always been kept hidden. Like basically your real name. Let's just say my real name is Saurabh Othare, but my artifact handle name would be Prozac 1943 or something else, so that user will not gonna know my real name. Okay. Before I wanted to build this application, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences, specifically worst possible consequences. So I went to ChatGPT. I said that this is my idea, this is my app. Suggest me kind of like a worst possible consequences in hundreds of question. ChatGPT kind of like a suggest me hundreds of question. This is one of those question. By the way, question actually in the mobile phone, but while recording, I cannot do anything at all. So that's why I wrote the question in here. This is the question. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, this is the question. This is the yesterday's question. By the way, yesterday I haven't really read the book. The reason is that not because of that I don't want to read the book. Is because of that like basically it's this thing that I don't know why I didn't really read the book. Okay, yeah. I make sure that I will gonna read the book today. All right. So the question: how will I kind of like how will I prevent the minor from accessing the content. Okay, yeah. What is actually minor and what is at least this thing? I'm gonna explain everything. So minor, okay, so minor means like that ki person who is underage, means like that ki less than 18-year-old. Okay, those are kind of like a minor, but it's not minor actually. Minor usually called as a kind of like a person who is under age of maybe 16 or 15. Okay, probably, because those are kind of like a, somebody considered as a kind of like a still kids. Okay, from, I don't know, it's a, from my point of perspective, teenagers, I don't know, but these are kind of like a things. Okay, yeah, like usually minor means like that I consider as a like a below the age of 17. I consider as a below the age of 17. Okay. So how I should supposed to be prevent them from accessing my content? Okay, first of all, why do I have to prevent them? Okay, like why is it really essential? Like am I kind, is my application is a kind of like a doing something wrong with them, or kind of like a explicit or things and that and that? Well, no, definitely not. Okay, but if I'm gonna tell you this thing, I don't have to do anything at all to kind of like a not to access a minor to kind of like assembly my application. Why? I'm tell you, okay, I'm kind of like a scientific point of perspective. I'm not a kind of like a physicist, by the way, nothing really at all, not a neuroscientist, but whatever the information that I have, I'm trying to tell you. Okay, yeah. I also kind of like a tell you from the experience point of perspective, because whatever the experience that I have, I'm trying to tell you. Okay. All right. So basically, is this thing that na ki when we are born, when we like when we born, we didn't really like a born completely. Okay. What do you mean by completely? Okay. So let's take a kind of like a something a baby cow born and the baby human born. Okay. What is exactly the difference between that? The baby cow is actually born, and when it born, it can walk. Literally, it can stand on itself. It can kind of like somebody understand who is a mother and things and that and that. It understand that baby cow can understand the kind of like a somewhat something situation surrounding. Okay, but as a human baby born, it does not. It's very vulnerable. It cannot able to be stand. It cannot do nothing really at all. It just kind of like a liability. Okay, yeah. A baby cow is not that much liability. Maybe kind of like a within a days, it is kind of like a simply became as its own. Okay, and baby cow is a kind of like a, if like a he has a kind of like a somebody like a he try to survive himself by kind of like a whatever it is. Okay, as a baby cow, but baby human is not. It is completely liability for almost like a 5 year, nothing really at all. Okay, and after the 5 year is still not, because it's still kind of like a liability, because human baby is a not evolved in the inside the mother. What do you mean by that, not evolved and things and that and that? Okay, we are human and we are very complex species. Okay, um okay, let me kind of like, okay, I don't know how do I supposed to explain this thing, but I'm trying to explain. Okay, so when the baby cow is actually born, have you ever seen those baby cow? They also have fur too. Literally, they have fur. When they born, they kind of like their skin is wrapped up with the fur. Okay. They could walk. They could stand by themselves own. But human baby is not. When the human baby is actually born, most of the organs are underdeveloped or developing state. Okay. They can't they can't walk. Definitely not. They can't do anything at all. They are a complete liability towards mother. Okay, but why is that? Why does kind of like a human baby is not really that much evolved, and a baby cow or any kind of like a baby kind of like a things are kind of like a pretty much evolved since they born? It is because of we are human, and it is because of that key the way that we are. Okay, Okay, look at me. I am a human and I could walk on my two leg. Okay, this is my leg, this is my another leg. Okay, and I could stand on my leg. This is kind of like a day-to-day kind of like a things. You might not think that ki, what's really kind of like a, something like that. But tell me, how many species could do that thing? Could walk on two legs? How many species? Humans, kangaroo, gorilla monkey, okay, and then probably is this thing that very few species that you might gonna found that could walk on two leg. Okay, now let me tell you one thing. Okay, there are so many. Maybe chicken are also kind of like a walk on two leg and things and that. But kind of like a look at their shapes and look at your shape. Like, okay, I am a human. I'm kind of like a tell you my shape. Okay, yeah, it's not really shape, but see. So, like right now, it's kind of actually this is my leg. Okay, yeah, and you might kind of like simply seeing the like basically it's a complete structure. It's not really that I'm kind of like a look like a chicken and kind of like a feels like weird and things and that. Like basically as a human is a straight. Okay, straight means it could straight walk. It could straight walk on the surface. Okay, we doesn't really have to be kind of like a occupy because of sorry we could able to be walk that way. um it's a kind of like a somewhat something gift for us. If I'm gonna say human gift, what is actually human gift? Okay, yeah. So maybe I'm kind of like a talking very stupid, or maybe I'm not really sure. uh Maybe I'm completely wrong, but what I'm thinking, okay, I'm just kind of like trying to think. Okay, yeah. Basically is this thing, every species have a kind of like a some sort of advantage of survival. In the Charles Darwin, in the kind of like a somebody in the ecosystem, in the Charles Darwin ecology, or in the nature. Okay, the species who could survive will kind of like ahead and kind of like somebody creates this new generation and things and that. The survival of fittest. Okay, it's a kind of like a natural selection process that who will kind of like survive in the nature. The particular species would kind of like survive in the nature. That species will kind of like evolve and go ahead. If the species does not really evolve, then that species will kind of like die. Okay, so this is kind of like some things. There are so many species are kind of like some die because they didn't really evolve that much. Evolve is really essential. Okay, now humans are also meant to be kind of like somebody really evolved. Okay, yeah. Now we can't have fur, we can't fly, we can't run faster. So basically is this thing that na ki only one thing that we might gonna survive is because of that using our brain and things and that. But let me tell you one thing, brain is not a kind of like a thing that ki kind of like a we are meant to be survive. Nothing really at all. It's our body structure. Okay. Um okay. So millions of years ago, human evolution actually started from Africa. And millions of years ago, Africa was a kind of like a dense forest, very dense forest. Right now we have kind of like a biggest desert over there, but millions of years ago that desert was not over there. It's a very dense forest. Okay, yeah, like when the kind of like a South America and kind of like Africa is actually connected. So at that time, the kind of like a, somebody the Amazon, like the stuff that we kind of like say Amazon jungle and kind of like a things, those are the part of the Africa too. So like Africa, the South Korean, like sorry, South America, and kind of like a Brazil and kind of like these are part of the things, and it's a very dense kind of like a forest. At that time, it was a kind of like a, the northern Africa is a northern Africa is entirely dense forest. Okay, now because of dense forest, we are evolved as a kind of like a monkey. And monkey is a really good survival technique that they could kind of like walk from swing from this to this to this to this to this. Okay, so that we could supposed to be survive and things and that. Now then kind of like a tectonic shift actually happened, and then kind of like somebody the most of the kind of like a continent actually went away, and the kind of like Africa is kind of like a push towards the equator. Okay, push towards the equator and things and that. So when this actually happened, the dense forest is actually gone. Okay, and it replaced by kind of like a desert and kind of like a deserted area and things and that. Now because of this thing na, the kind of like a trees are gone. Okay, basically this thing, trees are kind of like a very good survival technique that we could suppose survive ourselves. But because of there is no tree at all, completely kind of like a simply just a open field. So in that open field we can't survive as a monkey. We can't able to be survive ourselves, because obviously existing there is no tree. Tree is a kind of a good advantage that we could kind of like a hide and things, but no, we can't. Okay, because there is no tree at all. So basically is this thing that we kind of like have kind of like adopted like a basically is this thing at this time we kind of like monkeys are kind of like somebody fall into the ground, and because there is no trees at all, so we just have to kind of like go somewhere else, so we have to use our leg. Now monkeys are can't walk properly on their leg. Why? Because monkeys are meant to be still, if you see the monkeys are meant to be kind of like a stay into the kind of like a stay into the kind of like a trees and things and that. Okay, but basically is this thing, their body structure is kind of like a meant that way. Okay, but some sort of monkeys or apes fall into the ground and they are kind of like somebody using their leg, and since then kind of like an evolution actually happened. We are kind of like somebody started walking. Okay, started walking, started using our legs and things and that. That is a kind of like a evolution actually happened. You kind of like see the image that monkey kind of like somebody just walking and things and that. Okay, if you have a same question that why not we kind of like a move, why not we kind of like a move to somewhere we like a Europe or kind of like a things and that, why not we migrate? Well, at that time the population of kind of like a monkeys or apes or kind of like a things are almost very less, and obviously is this thing, we are animal, this is not developed yet. Okay, yeah, we just meant to be survive and that's it. Okay, so basically when we are kind of like somebody just kind of like started walking, when we are started walking, then we try to kind of like somebody our survival rate is almost went zero. What do you mean by that? Okay, so basically let's just say we are monkey, our survival rate is almost like the way that we survive on the nature, 10 out of 7, let's just say 10 out of 7 we meant to be survive. But when the kind of like a Sahara get deserted, the Africa get deserted and the kind of like some entire trees are gone and things and that, then we are started walking on the foot because there is no kind of like some trees. So since they are walking, our survival rate is drastically went low. Like basically we have survival rate of 7, suddenly our survival rate is almost like a 5 or 4 or maybe less than that. Okay, yeah. Now because of this thing, why we have kind of like not survived that much. Okay, why our survival rate is actually gone is because of that there is no tree and there is no kind of like a evolution adaptation actually happened. We can't run faster, we can't fly, we like basically nothing really at all. We just kind of like a very vulnerable animal to meant to be die. And at that time the animal was like so crazy, like a lions and tigers and hyenas are so big, so heavy, so strong that oh my god, literally you can't survive. So basically in that situation we kind of like adopt a kind of like a evolution. We started walking. Okay, we are started walking our leg. Now because of we are started walking our leg, our survival rate is not increased, no, nothing at all. Our survival rate is kind of like a still is a kind of like a simply existing, not really that much. Our survival rate is increased but very less, very few, like probably maybe if I'm gonna say our survival rate is 5, because of we are started walking, we are kind of like our survival rate is actually 5.2 or maybe 5.3. That's it. It's nothing really at all. We didn't really survive that much even if we are kind of like simply walking. Because let me tell you one thing, this is the leg. Okay, yeah. I'm kind of like showing this leg, but okay, it's really good. Okay, so look at the leg. Okay, yeah. So have you ever seen, this is my leg and this have kind of like a spring architecture. Okay, yeah. If you're not really seeing, okay, yeah. So this is the spring architecture, this is the curve and this is the toe and this is the leg. This is kind of like a spring architecture and then this is the supporting things. Okay, this is a leg we have. Okay, because of evolution actually happened, we didn't really have that leg. We have a flat leg like this leg. Okay, now what is actually happened when we have kind of like a flat leg? Okay, you not really understand the kind of like a meaning of this spring architecture. Okay, I'm gonna tell you. Okay, so when we have flat leg, what is actually happened? Okay, so take this sleeper. Okay, sleeper is a kind of like a really good example. Okay, yeah. So imagine, so this is a kind of like our leg. Okay, and if we are kind of like when we started walking or running, what will gonna happen? When we kind of like a somebody right now this kind of like a flat, so if you wanted to walk, it's just this, it's just this. Okay, so let me tell you what exactly happened. The entire body weight, entire the amount of body that we have is kind of like a come to the this weight, come to this kind of like a surface of kind of like a somebody surface of kind of like our leg. Okay, and because of this thing it kind of like a completely flat, and because of it completely flat, we can't run faster. We could walk but we can't run faster. Okay, why we can't run faster? Because there is no up, there is no down. It's nothing at all. It's a kind of like a things that na ki, kind of like a somebody is this thing, a brick that you have. Let's say a kind of like, imagine this is a brick. Okay, this is a brick, and I'm kind of like a moving the brick. So how do I supposed to move the brick? I have to kind of like a move from here, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Now this is not actually happened, but it's kind of like a thing. It is this, and then this, and this. It is kind of like a very difficult for run and things and that and that. Now because of this is kind of like a very difficult to run, we are kind of like a became dinner for most of the species. Literally, yeah, like a, we can't run that much faster. This kind of like a spring architecture that we have is evolution actually happened after kind of like a millions of years. Because of this spring architecture, okay, if you not really understand what's the spring architecture, there is no spring inside our leg. Okay, you might not see there is no spring at all, but what exactly happened, I'm gonna tell you. It's a very simple, it's a very good thing. Okay, yeah, when you walk, okay, yeah, okay, I'm gonna show my leg. It's a really cool technique. Okay, yeah, okay, so this is my leg. Okay, yeah, and this is a kind of like a something, the most of the weight is actually applied over here, over here. Okay, yeah, but usually most of the weight is actually applied over here, and this is a kind of like a supporting structure to kind of like a not to move away and things and that and that. Okay, so what exactly happened? When we walk, we kind of like apply this thing to walk away. Like right now this is kind of like a movement that I could able to be do because evolution actually happened. Previously it does not. This is like this kind of like a movement is not gonna happen. Okay, like it's a kind of like just stay and just we just do okay, now because of this spring architecture we could run, and before that we can't run that tall because it's a flat, and because of it flat it's just kind of like a thump, like thump. Sorry, I'm showing kind of like my leg. I'm kind of like really so pathetic, but it's really cool. Okay, yeah, like it's really cool. Okay, you kind of like a think that your leg is kind of like a very stupid leg, but no, your leg is kind of like a so amazing. Okay, so because of this thing, from your toe we could hold our weight on there. Okay, yeah, and this is a kind of like a somebody, it does not touch the ground. So because of it does not touch the ground, it create as a curve. That is called spring architecture. Okay, yeah. Have you seen trucks, their suspension? Mostly you see the suspension like a, usually kind of like you see the suspension as a spring suspension in kind of like a motor vehicle or kind of like a things. But when you went to the truck, okay, yeah, heavy load truck, they didn't have spring architecture. Why? Because spring is a kind of like a fragile. It does not have that much kind of like a, it does not sustain that much amount of time. They have this spring architecture. So they have kind of like a something, this kind of like architecture. They kind of like attach the kind of like a something, the whatever it is, metal piece, and then if metal piece and then metal piece and then metal piece, it's kind of like a create the curve architecture. That curve architecture act as a kind of like a suspension for the heavy duty vehicles. Okay, it's still actually available. It's still actually available because when you have this curve architecture, this is and this is, so like it's like that. Okay, so it's a kind of like a things, and then it's kind of like a thing. So basically that curve architecture kind of like somebody just like this actually happened. It's a very difficult to do this thing. Okay, but do you understand now? It's this and it's okay, you Google it. It's really cool. Okay, so because of this spring architecture, we could kind of like somebody adjust the load and kind of like a things that that adjust the load and kind of like create the momentum. Okay, create the momentum. We didn't really have that thing millions of years ago. When we have ape, we didn't really have that thing. We just completely flat leg. and that's why we can't run that faster. Okay, why am I telling you this story, dude? The question is kind of like a simple, was that ki, why are you not allowing to the minor? It's really good, it's really good thing. Okay, I wanted to tell you, it's like really really legit. Okay, yeah. Still I don't know the exact information. I'm telling you whatever the stuff that I see and read and understand. If you wanted to verify, go to the Google, go to the YouTube and watch bunch of video. They have kind of like a proper backing information. I'm telling you from the, because I'm kind of like I might be wrong. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Okay, yeah, whatever. Okay, so this Spring architecture is evolved after. Before that, we don't have that Spring architecture. So our survivability is kind of like something gone. That's why I mentioned that when we started walking, our survival rate is actually gone, and we just kind of like became dinner for everybody, because at that time there is no kind of like some trees and things and that on the Africa. One thing, okay. Now basically, how do we supposed to be survive? Because we are completely vulnerable. That species called kind of like somebody Homo habilis, probably. Homo sapiens, the advanced version. Homo habilis is the kind of like some version where we are very pathetic. We are meant to be kind of like some things. Okay, yeah, let me tell you one thing. Look at your palm. Okay, look at your palm. Your palm is a straight. Your palm is a straight. Okay. And you are kind of like so many things. Okay. Okay, let me kind of like tell you. Have you seen this patch? This patch. Okay, so this is actually kind of like a very common patch usually that we have. Okay, if you are kind of like a deadlifting or things like that, or if you are kind of like pulling the weight, usually this actually happened. This actually happened over here too. I have this over here. How I have this thing? Because I play badminton, so I have this thing. I didn't really kind of like pull myself, but yeah. So when you put so much amount of effort on your hand, so this kind of like a patch is actually happened. Not only here too. Okay. Now look at your hand. Okay, it's a very kind of like a really good thing. Okay, yeah. Your hand is a very kind of like a very say. Your hand is cannot able to be hold your weight. What do you mean by that? If you are a gym person, or if you are try to kind of like hold your weight from your hand, it really requires so much amount of effort. The kind of like a things, if you try to push yourself, it really requires so much amount of effort to do this thing. Okay, but for the monkeys it is very easy. Literally for them it's very easy. Why it's kind of like a very easy for them? Look at the shoulder. Okay, look at our shoulder. Our shoulder have a kind of like our body structure is kind of like a really great. Okay, so when we try to pull our body from our hand, basically where is what kind of like a muscle is kind of like a really applied? We need this. Okay, this is called kind of like a triceps. Okay, yeah. This triceps should supposed to be kind of like a stronger. Usually the force is actually applied over here. Okay, not just over here too. A load is a kind of like a distributed in multiple muscles. Okay, this, and then back end like this. Okay, back end like this is kind of like muscles. It should also kind of like applied over here. Okay. Now basically is this thing the monkeys can do very much properly is not because of they have kind of like a bigger triceps and things and that. They are not really that much elongated. What do you mean by that? I am straight. Okay, I am literally a straight. Okay, yeah. And this is all actually happened is because of that I have this spinal cord. Okay, that spinal cord, and that spinal cord is a kind of like also act as a kind of like a spring architecture. If you think your spinal cord is a straight, no, it's not straight. It's like this. It's like this. This is our brain. This is the kind of like a thing. It's S curve. Okay, it's S thing. Okay, your spinal cord is a kind of like a S thing. Okay, what exactly is this thing? It means okay. So because of this thing, okay, your load distribution, your body load distribution is a kind of like a meant to be evolved on your leg. Why? Because of your spring. Okay, when you kind of like okay, if you not really say, let's just say a kind of like a simple physics. It's a very simple physics. Okay, do we have something? Okay, let's take this. This is a kind of like a book. Is a kind of like a something straight. Okay, so let's just imagine. So this is a kind of like imagine this is a spinal cord. Okay, yeah. Now you imagine as a spinal cord. Don't look at that way. Look at the edge. Okay, yeah. So this is a kind of like a straight spinal cord. Okay, yeah. Imagine there is a leg. There is a kind of like entire body. So if I walk and kind of like an entire load distribution is actually came to leg, but it's not a leg. It's also kind of like a came to the spinal cord. So when this actually happened, when you are kind of like somebody. Okay, so when you have a kind of like a load over here and it kind of like applied load over here, because when we walk it just where that load came to the this straight spinal cord, because our spinal cord, if our spinal cord is straight, we can't really walk that much. And this is actually happened when we are homo habilis probably. I'm not really sure about this thing, but at that time we have kind of like a somewhat something, the kind of like a spinal cord is a kind of like things. Okay, it's a somewhat something same. Okay, yeah. But the evolution actually happened, and our because of evolution, our spinal cord is became S curve. Okay, yeah, S curve. So when it has a kind of like a S curve, what exactly happened? Our load is like imagine like it's not really that, but kind of like imagine this is a kind of like our leg, our brain. So when we walk, the impact does not go directly into the straight. It just not. It kind of like goes this like a, and then this and then this. Okay, yeah, that is called spring architecture. Okay, that is called spring architecture inside our spinal cord. Because of this thing, we are started running. Okay, we are started because of before that we can't run properly because our body architecture is not really meant to be that, so we can't really run that thing. But because of the spine is a kind of like a somewhat something as a curve, so we just started just things and that and then things and that and things and that. Because of spring architecture kind of like creates a momentum, and like a when, okay, what's the momentum, what exactly is this thing? Okay, it's very simple kind of like a physics law. Okay, you kind of like a take a suspension. Okay, take a kind of like any kind of like a suspension, any car suspension that they have. Okay, so when the suspension actually happened, when you applied, so spring compress. Okay, and after it expand, and when it expand, the load does not happen on wheel. The load kind of like takes by spring. Okay, so load distribution is carried by this spring architecture. Okay, so that's why we have a spring, because it distributes the load from bottom to top. Okay, because of this we have kind of like a spring architecture of spinal cord. When we impact from bottom up, when we kind of like impact from bottom, it just squeeze, but it just squeeze over here. It does not squeeze over here. It kind of like a let the kind of like a force is kind of like a pulling away. So when it pull away, load distribute, the entire upper body weight is kind of like a carried by spinal cord. Okay, not kind of like a bottom leg. Okay, and because of this thing, this creates the momentum, because if we goes up, then we kind of like a talk to this, and then goes up and this and that and that. It creates the momentum. It's a very simple thing. I need a kind of like a spring to kind of like a demonstrate to you. It's a very simple thing, but look at this thing. It's a very classic. Okay, yeah. So that's why we could able to be run. Okay, now let's talk about that key. Why we cannot able to be kind of like a something just like a kind of swing in the tree. Okay, specifically I'm talking about the Homo habilis, because this evolution actually kind of like happened like a Homo habilis, or maybe in the future maybe version, I'm not really sure about that. Okay, so we have a kind of like a palm. Okay, and the earlier apes have kind of like a spring palm. Okay, spring palm. Okay, and because of this spring palm, they could kind of like something lift the body weight in on their hand and things and that and that. Okay, now Homo habilis have very long leg. Like right now I have very long hand. Okay, how much long? Probably almost like right now I'm kind of like a really curve, but it's out of the frame. Okay, so this is kind of like a very long arm. Okay, now I have a long arm. So what exactly happened? Okay, let me kind of like tell you. So this is a kind of like a load I am kind of like holding from my hand. So if I'm kind of like holding the hand, okay, so I am holding this. Okay, so okay, so this is kind of like a much more better frame. Okay, so this is the load. and this is the kind of like a things. Okay, so how much load that I could able to be hold on this palm of hand? Very less. Okay, this is probably maybe kind of like a 300-400 gram I am holding right now. It's still hurting me. This is kind of like a very less load, but still it's kind of like a hurting me. If I add more load, I can't do this thing. Like literally, if I try to lift this thing, I could able to be lift, but still it's very difficult for me. Why? Physics law. Because when you object is kind of like applied like a weight distribution load, like a basically in the like a, in the physics there is a kind of like a load distribution like a UDL and things, and that the amount of distance away from the load, like a basically like a, the pivot point is me. Okay, yeah, like I am the pivot point. How I'm pivot point? Because I'm kind of like a somebody just have a kind of like a ground connection, and this is a kind of like a completely on airborne. Okay, this part is completely airborne. So this is completely when it is kind of like airborne, and it is kind of like a somebody have kind of like a distance almost like a 2-3 feet. Okay, yeah. So it is very difficult for me to hold the load, because the distribution is kind of like a far away. But if it closer, then the kind of like I could hold this book for very long period of time, and it does not really hurt me that much. If it kind of like a too close, then it's not really hurt. The same things, the when the load is kind of like a went close to the pivot point, then kind of like a it does not really hurt that much. What exactly happened? Okay, what exactly happened? Now basically is this thing, when the gymmers or when the kind of like a body lifter are kind of like lifting the leg from their hand and things, and that what exactly happened, that key they usually kind of like what exactly happened, they practice so much, that's why they are kind of like doing this thing. If you are trying to do this thing, you might not even push yourself. Why? What exactly the reason is that key right now, after the millions of year, your hand is a kind of like somebody meant to be kind of like somebody not to lift the load. Okay, yeah. So that is what exactly happened. Because of this thing, we have kind of like elongated hand. Okay, elongated hand. We also build these muscles, bicep, triceps, forearms, and things, and that to kind of like lift the load closest to the pivot. Closest to the pivot. What's the pivot? Like I am the pivot, na? It's kind of like things. Okay, yeah. If I'm kind of like say myself that I should supposed to be like this is the low weight, and I'm trying to lift this thing, it's very difficult for me. Even if there is a kind of like a 400 gram, but nothing lateral. But if I kind of like lift this kind of like a load, lifting closest to me, I could able to be hold this weight, or kind of like do this thing for very long period of time. It's kind of like a very easy for me. Okay, yeah. What I'm saying this thing, it's dude, it's been 37 minutes. I just have to stop it. Okay, yeah, like just directly jump into the point. I don't know, I'm really talk about the evolution and things, and that it's really cool concept. Like like it's really cool, like the way that our human body is a kind of like a development. It's so good story. Like we have a kind of like a something, we have shown the image, like basically we are kind of like a monkey to human, and things actually happen. It's not happened that way. The nature does not really kind of like the way that the upgrade actually happened into the human body is such a way that just like really amazing, and things, and that. Okay, I'm not gonna talk about the hand and things and load distribution and weight and things, and that. It's a kind of like a physics laws, and it's a kind of like a something how the economy ecosystem and kind of like how the human body is kind of evolved that much. I'm gonna tell you this thing maybe in the next artifact. I'm not really sure, but it's really cool. Okay, just do the search about how the kind of a human body actually evolved on YouTube. You might gonna found hundreds of videos. Just watch it. So amazing, you love it. Okay, the way that you kind of like started looking at your body in a kind of like such a way that is like wow. I don't even talk about the shoulder, and shoulder is kind of like a really good thing. Okay, okay, what exactly happened? Okay, so usually is this thing, our shoulder is this much shoulder. Okay, yeah, like if we are kind of like seen as a this much shoulder. Okay, yeah, but this is the front end. The back end of the shoulder is this much. Okay, like this much kind of like things. Okay, yeah, this much kind of like things. And also most of the kind of like muscles are not really that much over here. We have muscle over here, but we don't have that much muscle over here. We have muscle over there. Okay, yeah. Okay, which is kind of like a completely different part of the shoulder. But in monkeys, this shoulder and this kind of like a muscles are actually connected. That's why they are kind of like a lifting the load from the back end. Okay, like basically this thing, if you are lifting the load from front, it's too much effort. But if you are lifting load from back end, it's very easy for you. Okay, in monkeys, or kind of like before the Homo habilis, they have kind of like a somebody very less arm, They cannot elong that much. Their arm is a kind of like this much. They can't elong that much, and as also their kind of like shoulder is kind of like a bit more like basically this like a slanted up. Okay, slanted up, and because of it slanted up, it kind of like a somebody creates the kind of like a somebody back end support system, so that muscles beyond their muscle, like this muscle and back end muscle connected with the spinal cords are kind of like acted same way, so that we could lift the load. Okay, using this muscles and these muscles lift load and kind of like push towards forward. Okay, and same kind of like a muscle structure actually available in monkeys, but right now we don't really have it. Right now our shoulder is kind of like separated, because we are not kind of like somebody lifting our body every day on the trees and things and that. So our shoulder is a kind of like thousands of year our evolution actually kind of like a shoulder actually over, and it's kind of like a disconnected from this muscle, sorry, this back end muscle. It is this muscle. Okay, like our shoulder is kind of like evolved this much. Okay, and that's why it's kind of like a disconnected. Okay, but previously it is kind of like a very single muscle form, and that's why it kind of like hold the weight from the back end, and that's why it's really good. Okay, it's very difficult to kind of like tell you, because of your back end muscle is a kind of like very much different. Okay, all right. Okay, this is a kind of like hand and body and leg and things and that. Okay, there are kind of like a lot of kind of like things actually happen. Okay, now let's talk about the brain. Okay, because brain is a kind of like somewhat something really good thing. Okay, so your brain, like this part of your brain, that is called prefrontal cortex. Okay, and that is called medulla oblongata, or maybe I'm not really sure what exactly is this thing. Okay, so this is a very early developed brain. Okay, from Homo sapien. When we are considered as a Homo sapien, then we are considered as this is kind of like a developed kind of like a prefrontal cortex. Okay, before that we didn't really have that prefrontal cortex. We have it, but it's not really that. Okay, it's not like whatever the kind of like a development actually happened, the whatever the logic that you kind of like created, whatever the knowledge and things that you stored, usually who is responsible for that prefrontal cortex, that kind of like make you smarter. Okay, and our previous brain, the older brain, is a kind of like something situated in probably medulla oblongata. I don't know what is exactly name. It is kind of like connected with your spinal cord. Okay, literally it kind of like connected with your spinal cord. Okay, so what exactly happened? It is have animal instinct. We are animal. Yeah, literally we are animal. Okay, but what makes it kind of like a difference from animal to human? Because of this prefrontal cortex. Because of this prefrontal cortex, we are kind of like a thinking so many stuff. Okay, also let me tell you one thing. Because of this prefrontal cortex, okay, this is kind of like a things I'm kind of like get really confused, but I'm trying to tell you. Logic and emotion. Okay, when we are kind of like a very like a early stage of our existence, our emotion are much more stronger than logic. Logic is just evolved. Okay, so it's very tiny. So entire the brain function, or entire brain kind of like somebody the evolution, or entire brain kind of like develop through emotion things. Okay, and because of this emotion, and it is at that time it's very essential, because survival is kind of like a very much essential thing. Okay, so we are meant to be survive more, and for the survival it really required kind of like some emotions and things and that. Okay, and logic are kind of like also work according to it, and that's why we are kind of like started building some sort of weapons or things to kind of like survive and things and that. Okay, these things are not just happen directly. Okay, why? Because of that our brain required protein. Okay, yeah, protein, literally protein, and that protein is usually came from the meat, the kind of like assembly the meat, or kind of like a mass, or like meat. Okay, and basically where do I, so at that time we are kind of like a hunting, so we are hunting, we are killing the animal, we are eating that animal and things and that, and we get the protein. That protein is a kind of like a really help you to become smarter. Okay, right now we are shifted our diets to kind of like a green vegetable and things and that, which is kind of like a very less protein that you get, but the more protein that you get on the meat. Okay, lean meat, not a kind of like a red meat. A red meat you kind of like get the protein, but also kind of like get carnivorous kind of like a viruses and things and that, like it's a very different topic. We are not going to talk about that. It's a kind of like things. But the human development is actually happened because of we are consuming so much amount of wheat, getting excessive amount of protein. That protein kind of like really help your brain as well as your muscles too, as well as your muscles too. That's why most of the kind of like assembly gymnastic people or kind of like doing a gym people who are kind of like a use protein bottle and protein shakes and things like that, because when you consume protein, it not only kind of like add value in your brain, it also add value in your muscles too. Your muscle kind of like become stronger, the recovery kind of like get really faster and things and that. Okay, yeah. So we are kind of like only consuming meat, so that's why we are kind of getting protein. Because of that protein, kind of like only brain development actually happen, and because of brain development, our emotion and logic are try to connect with each other, and that's why we are kind of like started building the innovation, fire, weapon. These are kind of like innovation that we are kind of like building and things like that. So these are small evolution actually happened. It's been 45 minutes. I'm kind of like tell you in very simple things. Okay. Okay, so question. Okay, I did talk about the evolution, but it's a very long thing. If I'm started talking, I might not gonna shut up, and I'm really tired to talk right now. So I just wanted to wrap up in very quickly. Okay, yeah. The question is that why we do not, why minors are. I'm really tired. Okay, should I talk later? Okay, let's kind of like a things. Okay, let's just kind of like a things. Okay, okay. Uh Now I did mention how do we born. Okay, how do we born? So basically is this thing that our body structure are meant to be handle our body weight. Okay, but if the body structure get kind of like a disturb, then it is very much difficult for human body to kind of like a maintain what is actually the wrong structure. When the baby born, okay, when the baby born, let's take a kind of like let's just say it's also kind of like a depends on kind of like the way that we straight that we are. I have to do a kind of like a little bit of bathroom break. Okay, then I will gonna talk. Okay, let me kind of like drink a little bit of water. Okay, it's a really good concept. Just wait. Okay, just couple of minutes. Okay. I feel really good. It's been almost like a 49-minute I'm recording. If I continue this thing, then probably file get corrupted. No, not corrupted, but probably might be have a risk. I will pause and I will stop it, and kind of like this is the next. Okay, so this is the part 2. Okay, yeah. Okay, so where I was at the protein. Okay, yeah. So human development is actually happening just because of that we are consuming excessive amount of protein. No, nothing really at all. There is a kind of like a lot of kind of like a things are kind of like very much different. Okay, yeah. It's not that we are only eating the meat. The kind of like some the lions and tigers and all the kind of like a carnivorous animal, they also consume meat too. Okay, yeah. So why does kind of like a somebody we became smarter and those animal will not become smarter? What is exactly the reason for that? The reason is just not just protein. Evolution doesn't really happen like that way. Evolution happened regarding about the survival of the fittest. As I mentioned, is this thing the animal who are carnivorous, they are very strong build, and because of their strong build, they kind of like a tend to do a kind of like a hunting, and when they are hunting, their survival rate of hunting is always get smarter because their advantage is kind of like much more stronger because they have strength, they could run faster, they could do this and that and that, so they get very easy food. Okay, yeah. So when your survival, there is no issue at survival, then why does evolution actually happen? Let me tell you one thing. Evolution, what is actually happen? When you are not survive, when you are kind of like a try to survive, when you are try to survive, then evolution actually happen. But because of your surviving, because of your kind of like getting food and things and that, and you are not really worried about anything at all. So why does kind of like evolution actually happen? The upgrade happen when there is a error. If there is no error, why does upgrade actually happen? Same thing happened logic over the evolution too. In the lions and tiger, they are carnivorous, they are consuming so much amount of protein and things and that, but because of they are getting so much amount of food in their hand and in their kind of like a things, it's kind of like a very easy and very convenient for them. So evolution does not really happen on them even if they are consuming so much amount of protein. But we are very vulnerable. Like basically we went to hunting, but we might not get hunt. Like probably we try to hunting, but we someone kind of like a hunt us and things and that. We are try to survive, and because of we are try to survive, the evolution actually happen inside of us because we are trying to survive. And how that thing, we have started walking, we have started kind of like a utilizing our brain to kind of like a make a small weapons or kind of like a fire and things and that. Okay, yeah. Now we are kind of like utilizing our brain and things and that. Now basically there is a one thing that I'm gonna tell you regarding about how do we supposed to be born. Okay, yeah. So basically when we born, okay, when the mother is actually kind of like a conceive a baby, what is actually happened that she kind of like a create a extra load on her belly. Okay, extra load on her belly. Now basically is this thing, because of we are walking, so as a physics point of perspective, um, okay, um, use your hand, touch your ass. Okay, or touch your kind of like a, like if you are maybe women, then touch your vagina. um, Sorry. Okay, not for that thing that you are kind of like thinking, no. um, Feel the how much space have over there. Okay, yeah. Because of we are, okay, our kind of like a, let me tell you one thing, we are kind of like a somebody standing. Okay, yeah. And we have kind of like a V shape. Okay, we have kind of like a V shape means like this is our leg, this is V shape, and that V shape holding the weight of your body. Okay, yeah. Birth are actually born from here. Okay, yeah. The baby is actually kind of like somebody born here on the kind of like somebody on the wound. Okay, in upper body. Okay, so when it is kind of like a baby is actually born in kind of like over here, and we our body structure is actually over right here. So how does baby is actually born? The inlet wall, when the baby is actually came out, the window is very narrow, like a very narrow. Why? Because of we are walking like that. Okay, if you're not really understanding now, I'm gonna do the experiment. Okay, if you are male and female, whoever person you are, okay, you might have a ass. Okay, you might have a ass. Okay, stand and put your hand, touch your ass. Okay. And try to calculate how much big your ass hole. Okay, yeah. Probably it would, you might gonna feel this much, like this much. Okay, yeah, this much when you are standing, by the way. Now bend like a kind of like a doggy style and try to touch your ass. Okay, yeah. And try to figure it out how much it, that size is kind of like a much bigger. That size might be little bit bigger, like a, this much. Okay, not too much, but just a little bit this much. Why? What exactly is this thing? The physics law is that when there is a, because there is no space over here, na? This is the upper body, this is the lower body. There is no space over here. So when there is no space over here, how the baby is actually born? Okay, most of the animal, they are walking on two legs and two hand. Okay, like four legs. Okay, so their body distribution, upper like a front body and back body is a kind of like a distributed on four load. Okay, yeah. So they could carry much more load in their body. Okay, yeah. But humans can't do that thing, because if the human try to kind of like do this thing, it's not really possible. Okay, it kind of like death for the humans as well as death for the baby too. So it is not really feasible. So what exactly happened in the human womb? We are kind of like somebody that key nature kind of like decided that key evolution of human is like a development of the human is not should supposed to be happen inside the womb. It should supposed to be happen outside the womb, or outside the kind of like a world. Okay, yeah. So basically nature or universe or ecosystem is kind of like a decided that key like a make the human born, but kind of like a how do not kind of like give them that many advantage. Okay, yeah. So when that's why we are kind of like a born, we can't walk, we can't talk, we don't have any senses. That's why we are became so liability. But animals are actually born, they are not become that much liability. They could walk, they could stand on their things and that and that. Because of that, animals could kind of like hold their baby for a longer period of time, maybe kind of like a 18 months or maybe kind of like I don't know, much more longer. But we are humans, we can't bear baby inside our womb for that much amount of longer time, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. We have to kind of like extract the that things. Okay, yeah. Now basically, and this is not just a one thing, because of the birth canal. Okay, as I mentioned, we are kind of like a walking on straight, so our birth canal is very smaller. Like as I mentioned, like let's just say this is the birth canal. Okay, and which is very smaller. Okay, so nature decided that he kind of like a give the advantage or such an advantage or such a upgrade that essential. And what is exactly the essential kind of like a let's develop such an organ that is essential organ for survive. And what is actually the essential organ for survive? Hand, leg, no, brain. So let me tell you one thing, when the human baby is actually born, our brain, our head is much more bigger than rest of the body. Okay, yeah. Like basically, let's just say this is a kind of like a baby is actually born. So like literally the baby is actually kind of like almost like a 1 feet or maybe one, yeah, probably. So almost like a 45% of the human body is just consumed by head. Okay, yeah. And rest of the kind of like things are just fragile. Like basically we have very tiny hands and tiny legs and just nothing laterally, just kind of like somebody just early development. It's not really developed that much. But nature decided that key brain is a very much essential. Okay, yeah. So kind of like a develop the brain, but not fully developed, or develop a kind of like a somebody stages. Okay, let the kind of like a brain develop in a particular stages. Okay, yeah. So nature kind of like decided that key let the human born, but kind of like his brain is kind of like a developed through stages. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing. And what is actually the essential stages to kind of like make the brain make your brain work. So for the brain, kind of like a really essential element should supposed to be do breathing, very essential thing. Okay, yeah. This should supposed to be really essential thing. These are kind of like a kind of like somebody breathing is a kind of like a somewhat something really essential thing. So kind of like a somebody nature decided that he let the brain should supposed to be learn how to breathe. Okay, yeah. And if the brain is kind of like a somebody understand that he could able to be breathe and he could able to be host his body, then kind of like a extract the body, extract like a let the baby, let the human actually born. That's it. Okay, yeah. Then kind of like somebody figure it out, the kind of like somebody brain will kind of like develop then emotions and things and that and that and that. Okay, yeah. So nature decided that ki let's the kind of like a baby is actually born. So that's why kind of like a human baby is actually born after the 9 months. Okay, yeah, sometime kind of like a human baby is actually born like a 7 month or kind of like 8 months or things and that. And that when the human actually born at kind of like a 7 or 8 month, those are underdeveloped brain, and probably higher chances that brain is not actually developed. The babies actually comes with a lot of diseases and things and that and that. So the kind of like a better way to kind of like a human actually born is kind of like a after the 9 months or after the kind of like a 8 or something like months, then brain is kind of like fully developed, and then not fully developed, just the initial stage, just initial stage of kind of like a things that key for survival kind of like a thing. So let's just develop. Okay, so that's kind of like a things. And because of the birth canal, we cannot able to be hold a baby for longer things. Okay, yeah, so let him kind of like a release. So yeah, so let's just, that's why we are kind of like a, at the very stage we are very vulnerable. We are not really that much kind of like a only very that much, we are not, we are liability. Okay, we just probably barely breathing and that's it, and we need a food, and we need a kind of like a somebody mother touch, we need a kind of like a milk and things like that. It just kind of like a things. Okay, yeah. But as compared to the animal, they are kind of like a simply born with a kind of like a lot of advantage. They not only kind of like a breathing pattern, but they also kind of like a stand, they have also have fur, they also have sense of understanding regarding about the world, they could able to be see the world. Okay, yeah, as a human we can't see the world, we see the world but in a very blur way. Okay, a kind of like a very blur way we are kind of like seeing the world. Yeah, it's very blur, we can't really understand the world and things under and that. So okay, now basically is this thing, because of the nature decided that ki lets the brain kind of like a something evolve through stages. So our brain is kind of like evolve through stages. Okay, yeah, our brain is fully developed after till the age of 18 or 16 or 17. Okay, I'm not really sure the exact date, but yeah, our brain like a before that our brain is not really developed that much. A kind of like a somebody 10-year-old or 11-year-old kind of like a somebody humans or babies are kind of like a do something stupid work. They are kind of like eating a chalks or kind of like a eating clay or yeah. Why does they do that? Because they don't understand what is at least stuff they should supposed to eat and things and that and that. Okay, yeah, because our brain is kind of like a evolved through stages. Okay, yeah, let the kind of like a nature decided that ki let's kind of like a brain is kind of like a evolved through stages and things and that. So basically what exactly happened when we are born. Okay, yeah, and let's just say baby is actually kind of like at the age of 5. Okay, yeah, so his brain is properly understanding the breathing pattern, so he able to be survive. Food is kind of like a really essential, so he understand that he gets the food when he cry or when he kind of like get the someone kind of like the parents are kind of like put the food in things and that. Okay, yeah. Also is this thing that at that time brain is try to kind of like develop the connection between the kind of like legs and hand and try to walk on their leg and things and that. Okay, yeah, so kind of like only just brain is a kind of like a developing stage. It's a developing stage. As also is this thing at that period of time, if you are kind of like somebody give him lot of words or things or kind of like a change the environment, babies are kind of like a fully developed because the grasping power of the at the early stage of the human are much more stronger. The language is a kind of like a much more difficult stage that we cannot able to be learn after we get adult, but the babies are kind of like a learning language by looking at the world, listening the words and things like that. These are the complex subjects that kind of like some of these children are kind of like learning at early stage of their life, is because of their brains are kind of like develop and things like that. If you're utilizing this thing, then you are kind of like make your baby much more smarter by kind of like doing the puzzles, texture, colors and things and that. So babies can understand the colors and understand the texture and things and that. That's why usually doctor recommend that key kind of like if your baby is kind of like under the age of kind of like a 3 or 4, then give that baby to the play school and things. In the play school, the kind of like somebody the other babies are kind of committed with other babies. They kind of like they didn't really talk, but they just touch, they see the color, they kind of like place the things and that. It develop their thought process, not thought process, develop their senses and develop their kind of like a texture things and that. Okay, now this is what kind of like things. Now after the 5, okay, emotions started kicking. Okay, now as I mentioned, logic and emotions, these are kind of like two different things. Okay, in our body the prefrontal cortex are responsible for the logic. The emotion are kind of like this particular section. I'm not really sure what exactly it calls. Maybe medulla oblongata. I don't know what exactly it is. It's a kind of like some animal instinct kind of like a brain. So what exactly happened? the emotion are actually much more stronger, logic is kind of like a much more lesser. So we are taking decision through emotions, not logic. Example, at teenagers they are falling in love. Why? Okay, yeah. Okay, like this is kind of like a things. Why? But kind of like a things that nature decided that ki kind of like a somebody nature, what is at least saying, nature have a two laws: survival of the fittest and reproduce. Okay, yeah, that is the kind of like a things. Now the survival of the fittest, that is okay, I understand. What is the reproduce is a kind of like a thing that na ki if you wanted to improve your like a kind of like a generation or kind of like a make a things, then improve like a reproduce is very much essential. Okay, yeah. And how this actually happened by building a hormone, because when we have kind of like a sex hormone and kind of like a things, it's kind of like a really good. So that's why nature decided that at the age of kind of like a somebody teenagers, put give them a kind of like a somebody hormones, give them a kind of like a somebody sexual tension regarding about the another gender and things and that. That's why teenagers are kind of like a have a kind of like a lot of like a fall in love and things and that. You actually experiencing this thing that when you are kind of like early stage, probably at the kind of like a 17 18, we are very much we are kind of like a really like another kind of like another gender people and things and that. That is why, because of that key, nature wants you to kind of like have a sex and kind of like make babies. But we are living in the real world, we have a lot of responsibility and things and that we can't do that thing. Okay, yeah, but still we have this thing, we are kind of like somebody, nature wants you to kind of like make a sex, but from natural point of perspective, or maybe kind of like somebody the societal point of perspective, we can't do this thing, it's a very different thing. Okay, but that's why we are kind of like getting these senses, we are much more stronger to the kind of like emotions. Okay, now because of this thing, let me tell you what exactly happened. A human baby are meant to be kind of like attracted towards color. A human baby are meant to be attracted towards the kind of like somebody the texture. A human baby are meant to towards attracted towards the emotion. Emotion comes after the age of 14, things and that, but texture and color and things and that. That's why most of the kind of like a cartoon have kind of like a pop-up color. Okay, that because a pop-up color are kind of like a human babies are kind of like attracted more. Okay, yeah. Sound is a kind of like a much more kind of like a somebody not smoothie, but kind of like a like kind of like a somebody the like a kind of like a soft and things, so that humans so that human babies could understand. That's why kind of like a cartoon and things are kind of like how very pop color. Okay, yeah. And kind of like how weird kind of like a faces. Okay, yeah. They are not kind of like showing the exact human faces character. Because of that, human babies are try to understand, but they also wanted to kind of like understand a kind of like a thing. So that's why cartoon have a kind of like a different human faces kind of like a things, like a kind of like a, there is a kind of a cartoon named Papa Pig. Okay, yeah. Papa Pig is a literally pig. Okay, yeah. But they kind of like a represent as a human representation on that pig, and kind of like somebody the kind of like we have kind of a lot of kind of like colors and things and that. So babies are actually more towards that. Okay, yeah. Now towards the kind of like after the age of 14, the babies are kind of like more towards the kind of like a bit more emotional and things and that, and that's why they are kind of like a bit more emotional. They are kind of like somebody scrolling through feed and things and that. Okay, because of the colors and things and that. Also is this thing, those are the people who have a kind of like a very less attention of the span. Okay, like a very less like a attention, very less span of attention. Okay, yeah. Why? Because of that key, they are kind of like always want more, they are not wait for something. Okay, yeah. They want something, that and that. Okay, yeah. So this is kind of like a things. Okay, it's not kind of like a thing it happened everybody, no, it happened with a kind of like a something evolution surrounding and things and that. If your babies are actually grown up in kind of like a much more better surrounding, where kind of like a somebody their parents are kind of like taught them to wait and things and that to kind of like a better result, then babies are acted along that way. But if the babies are actually born in kind of like such an environment where kind of like somebody you don't really get it, you will gonna die, then the babies are actually born with a kind of like a take it or lose it. So they have kind of like came with different architecture, different with thought process and things like that. All right, get it? Okay, yeah. Now I will come to the question. The question says that how do I supposed to make sure that key minor should supposed to be not use my application, or maybe kind of like a prevent. Okay, there are multiple ways to do this thing. I also kind of like log in through Google and things like that. From the Google login, I also understand which user is kind of like somebody that key their birth date and things like that. In that situation, I would kind of like restrict those people and things like that. But important thing, that is not the important thing that Google will kind of like give the separate meat that key kind of like which people are kind of like somebody underage and things like that. No, it's not. It's a secondary thing. The first thing is that my application is actually designed in such a way, a minimalistic, a kind of like such a thing you are that you don't really get the instant gratification. a reels or TikTok or any kind of a YouTube shorts are kind of getting instant gratification. My application is does not. My application is a kind of like a is not getting the instant gratification. It kind of like a build through time. Okay, yeah. So basically, what is actually happened that usually the people who kind of use this application are such a people who are kind of like understand the emotions and logic, and they are after the age of 25 or 20, because at that time their brain is kind of like a much more better understand regarding about every situation, and they are kind of like a taking the decision very wisely. So those people will kind of like a listen the artifact, not the kind of like underage people, because there is no instant gratification, there is no color change in my application, there is nothing really at all, and as also there is nothing really change actually happened. The important information that you get when we listening, and when the people are started recording artifact, there is no instant gratification, there is no TikTok reel and things like that, and there is no visual representation, nothing really at all. So basically is this thing that the miners will not gonna use my application even if they wanted to, even if they can access to, but they can't use because it's nothing really at all. There is no search thing, there is no visual thing, there is no picture, there is nothing really at all. You just have to listen it there. And probably at that period of time, the babies are not really that much evolved. At least teenagers are not really that much evolved to kind of stay that period of time more kind of they don't really have that much instant gratification. Usually this thing actually happened the adult, like after the age of 20, after the age of 25, they would understand the world much more better and things like that, and then they will kind of listen to the artifact. So this is how I kind of design a kind of my application in such a way that it meant to be adult, not for minors. And if the minor are kind of using this thing, they are not able to be do this thing. What if they will kind of record the artifact? Also, they will not even record the artifact because they don't really understand things and that what they will gonna talk. Okay, yeah. But also is this thing recording artifact is a kind of like a thing I have to understand that minors might gonna record artifact because influence matter, because if the adults are kind of recording artifact, minors are also recording the artifact too, probably. Okay, but I don't know, because should I kind of let the kind of somebody give the minors to record artifact? No, not really, because their thought process are not really developed that much. I'm not really sure about this thing that how do I supposed to is this thing. The bigger question is that does minor should supposed to record artifact or not? My answer is a kind of somebody no. I am not letting underage kind of a people to kind of record artifact, because still they are not really developed that much thought process. Okay, I think, but I don't know what I will gonna do. I have to think about every possible point of perspective and things and that. Okay, also regarding about if there is a kind of some sexual kind of a content are actually available in my application, so how do I supposed to spread? So don't really worry about that. My application is kind of how judgmental system regarding about that the artifact is kind of a much more better way. Basically is this thing that Adam will try to understand if this artifact is a kind of a much more have matured language, it will kind of recommend to such a people who are kind of some adult people and things like that. I do not going to recommend. Adam will have algorithm regarding about that what kind of artifact would kind of share to the minor and things like that. But regarding about the minor, I don't really have that much kind of statistic. I don't really have that much kind of thought process regarding about how do I supposed to kind of serve my content through minor, or should I not serve my content through my should I not serve to my content to minor? I'm not really sure, but I will figure it out. Okay, I'm really tired. I have to end. Thank you.